All right, so thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Jenny van der Meeberg and I'm the Trade Manager at Hort Innovation. So I have about 20 minutes to talk to you this afternoon, and I hope by the end I will have done a reasonable job in trying to answer these questions. So today I'm going to focus on what are the current global trends in trade, because that will help me answer the second question, which is how does Hort Innovation support trade development? I'll then touch briefly on what are industry levy trade projects, also what are frontier fund trade projects, and then what is Taste Australia? What does it mean? Is it relevant to the vegetable industry? And finally, how do I get involved? So this graphic represents demand on food production. What it's telling us is that the number of people that the average global hectare needed to feed in 1960 was 2.4. That exact same hectare in 2005 was required to feed 4.5 people, and by 2050 it's predicted that that same hectare is going to be required to feed up to 6.5 people. So there is a high demand globally on land and water resources to produce food. This pressure is expected to continue to build until at least 2050. So what's spurring the demand? Why the increase? Globally, there's consistent growth in the trifecta of population, income and urbanisation. So that means we have more wealthier concentrations of people everywhere, but specifically in Asia and the Middle East. This global middle class is forecast to grow by 75 million people per year. So I'll try to contextualise that by telling you that Australia produced enough food last year to feed 61 million people. Put that in real terms, and I'm doing this to give you a sense of scale, Australia produced enough food last year to feed Tokyo, not all of Japan, just Tokyo, and Australia. That's about 61 million people. The key takeaway here is there is no problem on the demand side. The question is whether Australia can remain competitive, and how can Australia create maximum long-term prosperity by satisfying that demand. So in the Australian context, it's good news. We are growing to meet demand. There's a lot of text on this slide, but I've put the numbers up there in case some of you want to jot them down. What it's telling us is that horticulture's gross value production for 17-18 was forecast to 10.32 billion. In 5 years from now, that forecast is expected to be 13.6 billion, which is an annual value growth rate of 6%. What makes this interesting is that the growth will outperform the broader farm sector, which includes crops and livestock, where the annual growth rate has been around 3.9% over the same period. So our challenge, and it's been mentioned several times today by everyone else, we're a high-cost economy. We have typically strong currency, and while we have relative proximity to Asia, we still have substantive freight costs. We have limited industry and financial resources in a global context, and the national production base doesn't compete with volume players internationally. This creates our opportunity. So we believe if we build a strategy based on the concept of premium food, we'll be successful in the export space. We need to select markets where Australia has a competitive advantage and brand recognition. And what I mean by brand here is Australian brand. And we also need to target segments within these markets to identify the cohorts that have both a propensity to consume and a willingness to pay. And this is all very helpful in explaining how does Hort Innovation support trade. So, based on all of that wonderful data I just presented, which is derived from databases, research reports, market intelligence, conversations with exporter growers, Hort Innovation has a focus within the trade unit on the highlighted regions within this map. I don't imagine that's a surprise to anyone. So it doesn't mean that we won't do specific pieces of work outside of these areas, but our concentration of activity is within them. As everyone here would know, there are two pools of investment managed at Hort Innovation, and trade projects are being undertaken in both pools. So what we have is the traditional levy investment, where the source of the funding is levy. It's industry specific and it focuses on issues of today. We then also have the frontier funds, where co-investment is typically the source of funding. They're across horticulture projects and they look to invest for the future, might have a 15 to 20 year horizon. If we start by looking more carefully at industry levy investments and the type of trade projects that we see in this space, They're typically broken down into 3 areas. The first step is, of course, an export strategy, and the vegetable industry has a terrific one, so you're off to a great start. Then we find projects often broken down into the area of market access R&D, export development, and export marketing. I put export marketing up there just to give you the full picture. I am aware that the vegetable industry doesn't currently have a marketing levy. So the types of projects we see and invested in at Hort Innovation in the market access and R&D space includes things like treatment options for both new market access and market improvement. It might be around MRL management and information and education for growers. And it also might be around pest management to maintain current access. Export development projects can include things like engagement with government, industry coordination, industry communication, trade assessment panel applications, coordination of inbound and outbound missions, exporter education, market data and insights, quality projects and supply chain projects. And finally, in export marketing, we typically see trade projects in the space of participation in Taste Australia retail, which I'll come back to a bit later and explain in more detail, and also standalone marketing campaigns and consumer insights. So this isn't an extensive list, it's just examples of the types of projects that Hort Innovation works with industries on to invest levy funds. Every industry is different, and consider the examples I just gave you as a menu. So each industry will choose what satisfies their needs at different points in time. So vegetable levy investments specifically in trade projects, it is clearly identified in the strategic investment plan. There's an outcome explicitly focused on export growth. There are a number of trade-focused investments in the vegetable industry. One of the largest is the AusVeg Delivered Vegetable Industry Export Program. Some of the deliverables from this project have included export readiness, training and education, representation of the vegetable industry at trade shows, the reverse trade mission, which is where international buyers come inbound to Australia and has been happening over the last week or so, submission of market access applications to the Trade Assessment Panel in the interest of the vegetable industry, development of vegetable-specific MRL resources, and also ongoing communication and engagement on trade-related matters. So I've moved now to talk about Frontier Fund investments. The parameters of these investments is that they are across horticulture, they're for the purposes of R&D rather than marketing, and they require co-investment. Since inception, the Asian Markets Fund has invested $29.2 million across 10 projects. Some of these projects include Taste Australia trade shows, Taste Australia retail R&D work, which is where we work in the market with the supply chain to help understand storage and handling, for example, of Australian produce to make sure it's reaching the consumer in the best condition possible. Supply chain work, air freight capacity study, which is currently underway, work in the systems approach space, which is specifically about market access, and there's currently a food service proposal under development. So these are just a selection of some of the projects, and although vegetables is not explicitly involved in all of them, I want to give you a sense of what the Frontier Fund does in breadth and depth. So how does Taste Australia fit in? Taste Australia is an overarching position we use to present ourselves to the market across a range of projects. Taste Australia can be used as a brand for both R&D projects and marketing projects. It can also be used across levy-funded investment or Frontier Fund investments. It's a common position to ensure no matter what the activity or how it is funded, the Australian horticulture industry is able to present a unified face to importers, retailers, customers and consumers across our target markets. So in the past, these are examples of the brands that had been used. I'm sure, most of you have probably seen these before. So Australia Fresh was the previous trade show business-to-business brand, and now in season had been used in the retail setting. We've moved from there, and in considering where we wanted to be, industry voiced to us that we wanted to be committed to a single position. We wanted ourselves to be seen as premium Australian products, industry-leading and innovative, showcasing the unique Australian qualities of our produce. We needed the brand to be better targeted towards consumers, and we also needed to move beyond the messaging that was clean, green and safe, talking more about the experience. So we've moved to Taste Australia, and I'm hoping you've seen this before. It was launched at Asia Fruit Logistica last year. I'm going to quickly go through a couple of examples now of how it's been used. First, we're going to talk about Taste Australia Retail, which is a campaign we use in market to educate the retail supply chain and promote products to retail consumers in store. And after that, we'll take a look at a different application in the trade show environment. So Taste Australia Retail Strategy is really focused around how we work with retail partners. The strategic objective is to build a premium across horticulture position for Australian fruit and vegetables in key export markets. To do that, it focuses very clearly on what is the product we're sending, who are the consumers we're engaging with, which markets are we selecting, the partners we're working with to deliver this, and of course, above all, delivering value. The Taste Australia Retail program has several elements to it. So there's the consumer promotion end, which is quite similar to domestic marketing campaigns with elements of social media, media activations, and also in-store activity. We then also have the trade support side, which is usually drawn out of R&D, and that includes trade seminars and trade education work. These are some examples of the retail program's point of sale material. So it's currently in 10 countries across 10 products and spans almost 10 months of the year. These examples have been drawn from the grape and the cherry industry. The point of sale is also designed to be flexible, so it can be tailored to meet local requirements, such as translation, which you can see on the far side there at the large poster, and also messaging. So in that same poster, you can see that there is space for text so that we can highlight to certain markets the messages that might appeal most. A great example of that is that in Thailand, they love everything to be sweeter than sweet. So most of our messaging into the Thai market is about the sweet properties of whatever product it is that we're marketing. It's also been designed so that it can allow co-branding. If you look up on the top left, you can see that particular shelf wobbler has been designed with Olay's branding next to it, because that's something a lot of our retail partners ask for. So these are just some examples of what it actually looks like in action. This is in-store activities with cherries in Vietnam last year when they made their way back into the market. An alternate application of Taste Australia positioning is, of course, the trade shows. So Taste Australia was launched at Asia Fruit Logistica last year and has been used consistently since then at all international trade shows where coordinated by Hort Innovation. This includes Asia Fruit, which is in Hong Kong in September, China Fruit and Vegetable Fair, which is in China in November, World of Perishables, which is in Dubai, Gulf Food, which is also in Dubai, and FoodX in Japan. We're also evaluating industry's demand for additional shows in the future, such as China Fruit Logistica and Food and Hotel Asia, which alternates between Singapore and Indonesia. So I'll finish up with how do I get involved? The best point of contact to start with, although I put his name at the bottom, is of course Michael Coote. I don't know if he's just left the room momentarily, which is great timing. But he is, of course, National Export Manager at AusVeg and is the one driving the very large vegetable levy investment in trade development. So he would be a great place to start. Alternatively, I'm, of course, happy to take questions. And my colleague, Julie Willis, who's at the back there, does all the trade show work internationally. So if you want to have a chat to someone and understand what the experience of a trade show is like, please find Julie in the breakout and she'd be happy to share that with you. Thank you.